When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadabji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 79. Through addiction, international drug trafficking, and even incarceration, she made her comeback. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Emily O'Brien. Emily is the CEO and founder of Comeback Snacks. While in prison, she was on a mission to change herself and a mission to make a difference in the world. At first, she didn't know how she'd make that difference, but deep down, she knew that she would find something she was passionate about that would benefit from a purpose-driven facelift. The idea for Comeback Snacks was forged while she was in prison and became keenly aware of the tough challenges her fellow inmates and Emily faced in getting back on their feet. Since then, it has been the Comeback team's mission to raise awareness for second chances, hire those in need of a second chance when they can, and to support reintegration programs with a share of profits allocated to like-minded causes as they grow the business. Comeback Snacks are made with conviction. Emily and her team blend decadently delicious ingredients to make compelling recipes that offer a fresh take in the world of gourmet popcorn. Her motto is that everyone deserves a comeback. Well, hello, Emily. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am so pumped to share this story.
Yay. Yes, Emily, I'm so glad that you're pumped. And let me tell you how great it is to have you on the show today. I'm really grateful for your willingness to be here and to want to tell such an intimate story in your life, in a time in your life. For me, it continues to be a blessing and an honor to encounter guests like yourself, people like you, individuals, allowing me to tap into their vulnerabilities and drawing from their strength and insight and inspiration. All of this gets shared in this space that we've created. I just think it's really important that we take a stance together to help break barriers of mental stigma. So, Emily, in case you're still wondering, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter what the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. And so this platform serves in a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So today, together, my hopeful mission is for both of us to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, that is why I continue bringing forward a trend, and it's called the mental beauty rethink. Emily, What comes to mind first when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
For me, the mental beauty rethink involves really not rethinking at all. I think it involves looking back and seeing all the challenges as something that are good for you. So I didn't really think it was a rethink. I think it was just looking deeper into something. So when everything was happening to me, I knew it was good somewhere and I knew it was hard. So I didn't have to rethink it, but I had to look at each situation for what it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So, Emily, I hope you are fired up and ready to take our conversation right to that deep dive of your story. Are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Let's get the questions and this conversation going. So, first question, Emily, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
From prison to popcorn, my story of redemption.
From prison to popcorn, my story of redemption. Okay. So, what inspired this title?
So, what inspired this title was my journey through prison and finding redemption by also not just redemption in my own belief in myself, but also having others believe in me as well.
Okay. And it's so intriguing the way that you've titled this from prison to popcorn, your story of redemption. It shows so much about a personal journey that you've been on. So let's take it away. Tell us what your untold story is all about. Give us that skinny, the who, what, when, where.
The who was me. It was it was 2015. I guess when I look back, it wasn't just me because every action that we do is in relation to other people, other situations. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was 2013, 2014. I was 25 years old, living in Liberty Village, Toronto, struggling with substances because my family was going through a very difficult period. I also had my own social media company, and substances were involved in lots of events and things like that. So it was very easy to hide. I met someone through my work,
Mm-hmm.
actually, who I became very close with. Some people like to say he was my boyfriend. I don't call him that. I say he was just a close person that I trusted, and we got along.
Mm-hmm.
We went on a trip. 3 days into the trip, he tells me that we have to bring drugs back over the border because he's been in a lot of debt. And
Mm.
I didn't know what to do. I was trapped there. Everyone's always saying what they would do, but no one can tell you what they would do because once you're in a situation, it's so difficult to
Right.
figure it
And
out.
it's
So the
different
safe,
once you're in it, right? Like once you're actually experiencing a situation, you don't have the hindsight of afterwards. It's only what you know in that moment.
absolutely. And I knew that in that moment, the safest option was to just go home. He had booked
Mm-hmm.
the tickets. So he apparently these people that he owed money to had my passport. Long story short, I ended up on an airplane at the end of the week with 2 kilograms of cocaine strapped to my body. And after landing at Pearson, we were pulled into secondary and arrested. And so then I subsequently pled guilty to importing narcotics
Mm-hmm.
and was sent to 4 years in federal prison.
Wow. So let me ask you a question. So when you landed at Pearson International Airport and you went into secondary, like what do you think led them to feel that they needed to search you or do those extra checks?
Well, number one, I know my body language is the loudest language in the room,
Mm-hmm.
especially when they have trained professionals that are looking for signs of discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many things that a body can do when we don't even know it, when something is wrong.
Right.
Also, the nature of the trip. After I found out later that he had been going to this location many times, and he
Oh,
was actually under investigation. And
okay.
also, the destination we were coming from was a very popular destination for this kind of act.
Okay.
The drugs would come up from South America and then go to all these islands in the Caribbean, and it would come up in smaller amounts. Yeah, so it was, I guess we would call a high profile flight for drug mules.
Wow. Okay. Like, so when you got there, you were a few days into the trip and you learned all these new things about him and you learned all these things about what was about to happen. What was going through your mind?
I was actually, my first feeling was utter stupidity. I felt so stupid that I had been fooled all along. I was also very mad at myself for letting this happen to me
Mm-hmm.
because I obviously we all talk about red flags, and there's definitely some red flags with him,
Mm-hmm.
but we never look at them as red flags till after, right? So until after that red flag is out. And I also like to believe the best in people.
Mm-hmm.
So despite having these couple red flags about him, I still went on this trip. And I also know that my substance use was probably, was a result of me not caring about the red flags. I don't know, maybe
Mm,
not. I could have been stone cold sober when I met him, and maybe I still wouldn't have cared, right? Because it's
right.
all about that emotional attachment. So I just was so furious at myself, more furious at myself than I was furious at him.
Really?
Hmm.
And so when all of this happened and you got arrested, did he explain himself a little more, or was there anything else that happened between or interactions between the two of you?
So when we were arrested, because he also had it on him, they
Okay.
separated us immediately, and then I wasn't allowed to talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'll never know the real story because I found out that everything that he told me up until then was a lie. So I didn't even want to hear anything come out of his mouth because I know that he tried to make it seem like he was telling the truth,
Right.
and I just couldn't trust that anymore. I was done protecting him, and I needed to start protecting me.
I'm sure your trust was broken the moment you realized what was happening when you were on the trip and
Yeah.
recognizing what you walked into. I can only imagine what that was like as you went through the whole process once you landed at the airport and going through all of that. And so you realize I'm nothing he says is going to matter to me because I'm never going to know if I can trust him. And you were separated, you weren't allowed to speak with him. And then was there ever any interaction or
There actually was. So about 4 days after we got arrested, even though he wasn't supposed to, he reached out. And I was in a point of such distress that I actually felt comforted that he reached out because I felt so lost and confused and scared.
Mhm, mhm,
I didn't know if people were going to come after me. I didn't know this world, right? Like
mhm,
we had just lost someone else's drugs that weren't mine, that are dangerous people. So I just
yeah,
wanted to know that I was going to be okay, and
mhm,
safe. And so he told me that I was going to be okay and that he was the one that was going to take the heat for it. And that was the time that I actually believed him. But it didn't stop me from being paranoid for years after that until I actually went to prison.
wow. Did anyone give you any comforts to know that you would be protected or anything like that? Or was it just that you faced charges and now you're facing consequences?
Yeah, and it was, you are charged, you are on house arrest. Don't talk about the case with anyone because it's going through the court. So I was silenced.
Hmm.
You have a lawyer that's going to court for you. You don't really say anything because they're the experts, and so I just felt very suffocated at that
Mm,
time.
hmm.
So I didn't know anything except for what he told me, I guess, and that's so I had no choice but to believe it.
Right. I get what you mean. I mean, you didn't, it's a whole new world for you. It wasn't something that you engaged in before. So feeling lost and
No.
confused and scared and worried and paranoid, I can't imagine not feeling those things, right? It sounds like, you were just going through all the motions.
Yes.
And so being on house arrest, was that your entire sentence, being on house arrest, or how did that work?
So how it worked was when I was arrested, I had to get bail in order to get out of detention. So you kind of hear about it all the time. It's like, oh, were these people granted bail? Blah blah blah.
Mhm.
So in order to get bail, my parents had to bail me out, and so this wasn't in the form of cash. It was in the form of an asset guarantee. So they had to put up part of their house
Mhm.
in order to get me out. So if I'd messed up when I was on bail, technically the courts could come after that if they wanted to. And also part of that was me having to live with my mom and my dad because they're called an assurity.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you see it on TV where you see people's best friends picking them up from jail. Like it wasn't like that. Like it was such a serious offense that
Right.
I had one phone call and I had to call my parents because they were the only ones that could get me out.
Right.
So house arrest was just the time while the case was going through the courts.
Okay. And so how long was that?
2.5 years.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then once I pled guilty, then my prison sentence started of 4 years. I submitted to the court on, sorry, not submitted, I surrendered to the court on January 18th, 2018. And that was my mom's birthday.
Wow. That must have been a really emotional and full emotions time.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So let me ask you, what was that like to know you had this one phone call, your parents were gonna, and you weren't sure how your parents were gonna, you probably didn't know all of the details of what your parents had to do or not do, or how you'd make bail or what would happen.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
what was that process like for you internally?
Lots of shame. Definitely a
Mm,
lot of shame. I remember when I had my first bail hearing, and this was after I'd spent the weekend in jail after getting arrested. And I saw my parents in the courtroom, and they were just, I couldn't even look at my mom in the face.
mhm,
Like they were obviously terrified, happy I was safe, but also, what the hell did you just do? Like all those looks all at once.
mhm, mhm.
And I can't say anything. I can just see them.
Right.
I kept it all in. I kept all the emotions in, and then finally, when after the bail hearing, I got outside. I just burst into tears and sobbing hysterically. And so it kind of all
Mhm.
came out after that.
Right. And was there anyone with you when that happened, or were you by yourself, or
No, so they had to bail me out. So I was with them.
you were with them when that happened? Okay. And what was their reaction? So while they were giving you all of those looks or having all of those reactions that was showing up in their facial expression, did they ever share with you what they were actually thinking or feeling?
No, no. I think the lawyer was there, and I think we were all
Mm.
stunned, confused. We were, my mom works for McMaster as a fitness teacher. My dad works for the Catholic Church, and so this
Mhm.
was just so far away from what we represented as a family.
Right. So after you were able to have your hysterical tears and let them all out, did you start feeling more of the emotions, or do you feel like it actually helped you release some of them?
Yeah, I started feeling more of them, and it helped absolutely
Mm-hmm.
at that time being. I felt like I was glad that they were there
Mm-hmm.
because the anger phase hadn't set in yet.
Right. And so when you were on house arrest, right?
Yeah.
I mean, were there certain privileges that you still had, or were there certain things that you had to make sure you abided by?
Yeah, I could only leave the house for work.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even really go to the gym. I could only leave the house for work, medical, or legal. And I had this dog, and I ended up having to give the dog away because I was working all the time and I couldn't look after it. And because I had the dog in Toronto with me before, but then my parents lived in Hamilton, Ontario, which is about an hour away from Toronto.
Right.
So I would have to leave earlier and come back later. So I ended up having to give up the dog that I really loved, and that was tough too. Basically, during that time, because I still had my social media company, it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like I still had a bit of freedom because I was still going to events and different things, different appointments, different photo shoots, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
different than going to one office every day.
Right. So there was like a work socialization component that is still very social.
Yes. Yeah, and it felt different. Like I didn't feel like I was trapped in it. I became more creative in that space because I wanted to go to the gym. So, I ended up offering to do social media for a gym, and then that's how was able to go to the gym. So kind of like creating work and beyond the conditions, because I knew, how are you going to put someone on house arrest and not let them exercise? And I needed exercise. I needed to do kickboxing and help get those emotions out, right?
Right. And so like how did your vendors or like the people that you were working with, like how did they react, or did they know? Or were you able to keep it, on the down low?
Oh my gosh, that was one of the hardest things. I couldn't tell anybody.
You couldn't tell anyone that you're on house arrest.
Yeah, and not knowing if I got a speeding, I don't know, like I didn't know at the time if every police officer could knew, right? I didn't know if anytime I drove by a ride program or they knew who I was, right? Like the
Right.
levels of paranoia were just through the roof. And I remember having to drive some stuff. We drove I picked up two of my staff and drove to an event one day, and I was like, oh my God, it was the most terrifying thing because I didn't know if I was randomly going to get pulled over and be like, what are you doing? You're on house arrest, right? And if it was work related, I just didn't know. There were so many unknowns.
Like a foreign situation to be in, right? And one you never thought you'd be in. So it's not like you're exposed to any of this before.
Right. Exactly.
So that was house arrest. So what was prison life like?
Prison, so I went to a medium security facility in Kitchener, Ontario, and it's called Grand Valley. And that's where everybody starts is medium unless you've been convicted of a very violent offense.
Okay.
So you start in medium, and the first day was very prison-like. You're sent off in a van that has no windows. It's like a paddy wagon.
Okay.
You're handcuffed from head to toe, and everyone is connected by the same chain. And then you're all shoved in the back of this paddy wagon where the heat is like blasting on. You don't know when you're getting there. There's no bathroom breaks. Some people went to the bathroom in their pants because it was like a 3-hour drive to the prison and they wouldn't stop. And so we get there, and then the first day was you have to get all your fingerprints done. You get strip searched. You get searched by the dog. And then they assign you to a house. And going to the house was almost like going to Calvary or something. I thought it was like I was about to go get executed because they give you your prison property stuff from the main office. So I'm just trying to paint a picture. So picture like two big circles, two big tracks, and around these big tracks are houses. And then there's one main compound where like they do all the admin, all the programs, there's like a gym there. So, but once you get admitted, you have to drag this giant bag to whatever your house you're in down this massive track. And so you're dragging it. And at this time, all the other inmates are inside the house because they have to, that's just how they do the processing. So you're dragging this bag, massive clear bag full of like blankets and Velcro shoes and a fan, like all these things. And people are just looking at you and you're carrying this massive bag. Everyone's staring at you through the windows. And so it was a little bit daunting, to say the least, the first day. But then actually, when I got to the house that I was at, the vibe totally changed. This woman opened up the door and she was like, hi, welcome to house 5.
Oh, okay.
And she was another inmate. So she was, so based on her like welcomingness and her warmth, I immediately felt like I was going to be okay there.
Like you felt safe?
I wouldn't say safe.
So you still felt fear for your safety, or did you feel a little bit more like her welcoming and warmth was like kind of making that feel a lot less?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so, people on TV, right? What we see on TV is obviously, I'm assuming, very different from what you experienced. But, the whole experience of physical violence or like threats, things being really grim.
Yeah.
Would you say that is what you experienced, or was it a bit different?
It was completely different. We often watch movies and TV and media, and they are just built to create drama. So they show the worst of the worst. And yes, there is violence, of course, but not as much as like there's violence that isn't in prison. So the majority of people that I met there are actually really, really nice. If someone else was going through something and had violent tendencies, I saw why. You learn so much about people and the horrible things that they went through throughout their lives. The majority of women in prison have been victims of horrific violence, and that often can just be a way of reacting. It can be the way that the people handle things.
Right.
But personally, I didn't see any random acts of violence. Like they were all based off some prior relationship that the two people had and something that went on with them prior to that.
Right. Okay. So what else do you think is important for people to know? What else can you tell us in terms of like this whole journey of substance use and this person who you thought was sober, and with the drugs and the trafficking and the charges and the sentencing? What were some of the other struggles that you faced because of that?
I faced a lot of anger. Absolutely. I was angry at myself. And I'm talking about like the time between getting arrested and going to prison. I was angry for like a good year of that. I continued to drink, I continued to do drugs. I was like, fuck, screw everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
people that were I don't want to say my friends, but it was almost like there were some people that were happy to see this happen. Not happy because they wanted me to get better, but happy just to think that they were right, the whole time.
Right about what?
Oh, like right about like kind of like the I told you so people, right?
Okay. So like impressions that they had of you before,
Yeah,
things that they might have told you, warned you about.
yes.
Okay.
And like there was a certain group of people that said it was basically all my fault.
So yeah, how did you deal with blame and stuff like that?
Being angry for a while, being pissed, and then exhausting myself with that anger and that need for revenge. Where I was like, no, I'm not put on this earth to feel like this, and I'm not put on this. This isn't getting me anywhere. But I had to be so mad for a while to realize that it wasn't getting me anywhere. Because sometimes being mad feels good.
Well, you're in control, right?
Yeah,
When you're expressing your anger, there's some way you feel in control.
yeah,
And if people are blaming you and you're being misunderstood and your life has been stripped away, of course you want to feel some control.
yeah,
It's pretty natural. Yeah.
yeah,
And so you were consumed by the anger until you realized, okay, this is not what I meant to do with it. So then things shifted for you.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And it was actually when I was still on house arrest. And, I'm not supposed to go out, but I went out to get cigarettes because at the time I loved smoking cigarettes. No shame. It was in Fresh Week. Like, when there's like when university starts and there's
Yeah.
chaos in the town. So there's a more of a police presence. So I happened to go out to get cigarettes at that time. Then I get pulled over and then I actually get arrested and put back in jail for one night. My mom has to bail me out again. And my lawyer said something to me that was very poignant. And I think it was kind of like the tipping point, but not tipping over, tipping up, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tipping
Okay.
up. And he said, Emily, we know that you are a good person. Like, looking back on my life, I was always volunteering. I was always traveling the world, helping people.
Mm-hmm.
I had jobs. I had lots of great friends that were supporting me through this. But he's like, if you get caught disobeying these rules, I know they're very strict, but if you get caught again, they're not going to let you out of jail until this sentence is finalized. And we can't prove that you're a good person if you're still stuck in there. It's going to be much more difficult. And so that was kind of like
Mm-hmm.
the day when I was like, okay, the time is now to just turn this whole thing around. Because obviously being mad has just got me further behind. And that's when I started to really respect the rules, stop being mad, started taking advantage of more of the exercise, respecting my parents, and respecting myself and believing in myself. So I had about a year and a bit until I actually ended up going to prison, but things
Mm-hmm.
changed a lot after that. And so when I went to prison, I was actually ready. I was ready for it.
Right. You were ready for whatever was supposed to happen because you were like, this is the process. It's like almost like you surrendered and embraced. Like you surrendered to like the things that you didn't have control over. Like, well, these things did happen. I engaged in these things. These are the consequences. So I'm going to go face them and deal with them and work through them.
Yeah.
So you had that mindset ready to go.
Yes.
Hmm. So, Emily, when people come to see me for therapy, individuals, they're typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started. They're coming to me with like all sorts of things that they need to sort out and work through and want to just, start shifting their mindsets or start taking certain steps to work through things in their life. Some people are in the middle, perhaps they're in the thick of things and they really need help navigating. And some people are looking back, they're trying to gain closure or they're wanting to do some personal growth. So they're trying to understand certain aspects of their past so they can move forward. For yourself right now, in terms of this journey that you have talked about, the story that you've been sharing with us, what part of the journey would you say that you are in? Would you say that you're just getting started, in the middle, or looking back if you had to pick one?
I would say if I had to pick one,
Yeah.
I would say just getting started because I feel like you can't get started without looking back, really. Right?
Okay. How would you know you're moving through from getting started to being in the middle and looking back? What would be some indicators that you're moving through?
Excitement about what you're going to learn and how you're going to become, I don't want to say better because I didn't ever believe I was a bad person, but more aware of how quickly things can happen, of the impact that our decisions have on our loved ones, and more aware of things that will happen, I guess, to you that might be bad, it might be crappy, but knowing that something good can come of it if you are willing to work on it.
Okay. So, given everything that you have shared so far, right? Like talking about everything from like different things that you experienced, the paranoia, how fearful things got, worrying about what was even going to happen before you even went to prison, or even just dealing with the house arrest, making that first phone call, all of it. There's so many parts many people would never be able to understand because what you went through is quite unique. And in that, there is so much that must have affected your mental health. Like you've already started to talk about the paranoia and, the emotions you were experiencing and the toll it took on you and having to shift your mindset. But can you share a little bit more about how your mental health was impacted at the time?
I would say I didn't even know what mental health was. That's how impacted it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I was more concerned with my financial health, with my business, with my family health. So my mental health was on a back burner.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really know what was healthy until after I got to prison, where I was able to kind of sit in a room by myself and look back on those antics or those behaviors or those thoughts that are just not even feeling anything, right?
So you were kind of like in a frozen state.
Yeah. Yeah, like mental limbo or purgatory. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, did you ever experience like certain thoughts that you were consumed by, like certain thoughts that kind of ran through your mind, or any emotions that were really keeping you in an intense place?
Revenge. Yep. That's number one. I wanted revenge on this person for a while, and I surrounded myself with people that would encourage that. People like, oh, let's go, like, and condone and encourage violence. And for a minute, that felt good. I was like, yeah, like bleep this bleep. I don't want to swear,
Hmm.
and it felt good. And then I realized that was so dangerous.
Right.
That anger about the whole situation eventually turned into revenge because at first I was just mad at him, but it wasn't until I had all these conditions and then I found out I was going to prison that it really turned into revenge.
And what did that revenge do to you on the inside? Like, what was the experience of revenge?
It was eating me alive. That's when I knew when something eats you alive, you actually become very, very weak. And I didn't want to be weak.
So, describe feeling eaten alive. What does that feel like?
Just not going anywhere. I wouldn't leave my room. I would just enjoy having some drinks, being mad, and talking to people about how I was going to get him back, about how I was going to know that how he ruined my life, so to speak. And I wasn't even focusing on what I should be focusing on. And that was my own
Mhm.
my own healing and healing my own family and my own
So you're
body,
really
right?
fixated on the anger and the rage, and if I could, this is what I would do, and here's my plan, and just dwelling in that way.
Yeah. Again, it's something we see on the media all the time, right? We see all this anger, rage, we see revenge, we see violence.
Right.
We actually act so similarly to what we see
Hmm.
in TV and media, and like we see it so much that that's what we think is right and what's going to make us feel good. I mean, that's what sells a movie, but it doesn't help us as people.
Hmm. Emily, in a private conversation we had, you shared with me the idea of you had many armchair advisors. Can you share more about that?
Absolutely. So as the story kind of went, we tried to keep it within the family, but then again, some people are just going to find out, and some people are going to tell people accidentally or on purpose, right? And then you'd get these little tidbits. I was like, oh, I would have done this, or like that would have never happened to me. Oh, why didn't she call the authorities? It's like, oh well, her life's gonna be over. Oh, you're never gonna find a job again. And
So lots of people shooting you, and you should have done this and you should have done that, and they don't even know because they weren't even in that situation
it's like, oh, why don't you tell the police? It's like, so I'm gonna rat on a drug cartel? Yeah, okay,
in a foreign country.
I'll go right on that. you can open the box of my head at your doorstop. Like, like I
Right.
don't, but you don't mess around with those kinds of people. You don't tattletale. You just get home
Hmm.
safe.
Yeah.
So,
Because I'm assuming that you were, when they had your passport details and all of those things, tell me, was there a part of you that was wondering, like, what would happen to your family or the people in your life back home in addition to yours? Like, did that stuff ever cross your mind?
yeah, absolutely. And that's like that's what was said to me by him. Whether that was actually true or not, but I wasn't about to find out. Like,
Right.
okay, I don't know this world. I don't know these people. All I know is that they're dangerous. They don't care about people at all. So
Right.
I have to care about me. And I didn't, even if I knew that, like, because when I was coming home, I didn't think prison was even an option. But even if I did know, I would still go home. I can talk to someone, whatever. I can talk about how it happened, but not who it happened with. And I just wanted to go home
Right.
safely to a family that was safe.
Right. And that was the decision that you made based on information you had at the time and what you knew and
Yes,
how you were coping and what you could witness firsthand. It was the best decision you could have made. Even if you were to sit here with me now and say, I wish I did something different, in that moment, with all the information you had, that is the
hmm,
best that you could have done.
absolutely.
When we look back in hindsight for any situation, we might think to ourselves or say, hey, I could have handled that different, or maybe I could have done this different, possibly. But, we're all human and we have imperfections. We don't always make the best choices, but sometimes we do the best that we can. And that was the best that you could and the best way that you could operate in that moment.
Absolutely.
It's a survival mode. That must have been so terrifying. So tell me, as you went through this, what were some of the other competing inner thoughts that you experienced? Even though you were saying that at first, mental health was on a back burner, but just thinking about it right now, whether you were aware of mental health being affected, what were some of the things that you were entertaining in your mind?
There was definitely like a time where I depressed and I was about to give up. So I don't know if I want to say it was, I definitely had bouts of suicidal thoughts. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
People wanted me to be sad, and like in their version of sad was crying. But people can't tell you how to be sad. People are sad in different ways. And we have this cookie cutter image of what it's like to be sad. And so people just assumed that I wasn't sad because I wasn't crying and because I was still doing my business. It's like they wanted to see me like at my absolute worst. And then so I was like, fine, you want to see me sad? I'm just going to drink in my room and not leave. So I hope you're enjoying this. But then I was like, this is stupid. Why am I putting on this act for people that are watching? It's like watching a cockfight or something. You're watching two animals kill each other and you're
Mm-hmm.
enjoying it. So
Mm-hmm.
I felt like,
Mm-hmm.
the Broadway musical, it's called Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Yeah.
There was like so many colors on that jacket that he had. And I would have never known how many colors were. That's kind of like what emotions are. You have so many emotions, but people only see you as having, five or six. And sometimes we don't even know that we're experiencing them. It's like you're either happy, sad, or mad, or depressed, right? But there's actually so many other ones, and we don't even know. We don't even know how to label them. They're just there.
Right. Right. So tell me, I'm curious about rage. How did you deal with rage?
I didn't for a bit. I just was raged. I was enraged. So I was that's what led to the revenge, the wanting revenge.
Well, when you were able to regulate it, what are the things that helped you regulate the rage?
I would say planning ahead and just taking my mind off the revenge. And I began to research where I was going, what I was going to do. I began to research success stories of people that went to prison. I began to really take on lots of physical activity, which then helped me not think about that. So it wasn't like boom, the rage is gone, and it was a gradual process. I became more involved in entrepreneurial events and seeing all the good that was in the world. So
Mm-hmm.
once you do that, you realize that rage is not for me. That's when I realized being that mad was not for me, and it was not good for me, and it was. I knew that there was like a lot of life ahead of me, and by abandoning that rage through the things that I just mentioned, I was able to see that again.
Yeah. And what did rage teach you?
That it feels good for a little bit, but not long after.
Mm, right. it's like an urge that you settle, but it doesn't really have a lasting impact.
Yeah, but you shouldn't be afraid of being mad because then it'll just come out even stronger. If you just bury this rage and pretend it doesn't exist, it's going to blow up and that's even worse. So you might as well just allow yourself to be mad.
Feel the feelings. Yeah, feel the
Yeah.
feelings. Feel it, work through it, allow yourself permission to feel. That's
Yeah.
important. Yeah. Okay. So, Emily, what is your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
I think that even though I was in a physical prison, I think that we've
Mm-hmm.
all been in some sort of prison before.
Mm-hmm.
And we can blame others to how we got there or be mad. I'm talking about financial prisons, environmental prisons, marital prisons,
Mm-hmm.
even just mobility prisons. And we can be so mad and blame the world around us for why we got there, but that actually doesn't get us anywhere. And it's not until you abandon the rage and the blame and you begin to see the good and help others on your journey that's how you can really heal.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And I like the way you use the analogy of like a physical prison and all these other kinds of prisons. It exemplifies the idea of feeling confined,
Mm-hmm.
feeling stuck, feeling trapped. But
Mm-hmm.
it's more about what you do with it, is what I heard you say.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, is there anything else that you think is important for people to know?
I think that mistakes are universal, but so are comebacks. And part of comebacks is accountability. It comes with educating others, being kind, allowing for all these emotions, and not having a cookie cutter way of doing it, not letting anyone dictate your own journey. Because at the end of the day, the only one who's actually going to get you out of whatever you're in is you.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So, I'm curious, what is your game changer inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story? So, when you were at your most pivotal time, what was the most inspirational thing for you? Was there a quote, a book, a mantra, a person, an event? What was it that spoke to you?
It was it was that time when I got was arrested on house arrest and the lawyer and my family were like
The lawyer. Yeah.
they're like we know that you're a good person and we know that you're strong and we know that we can all come back from this, but if you don't abide by these rules, although they are very strict and not what you're used to, we're not going to be able to help you fight this because you're still going to be in jail. And so that was my pivotal moment. I was like, okay, despite all this, despite all the chaos that I caused and continue to cause, these people love me and still believe in me. And that's when I really began to see that I couldn't hurt them anymore. And I didn't want them to be in pain anymore. And I knew that I could use this as a way to fight for something good instead of fighting for something bad.
Right. And I also heard the undertones of that experience of, despite all the chaos and all of the mess, you experienced unconditional love, and that anchored you.
Yes, but at the end of the day, I think it does have conditions. Unconditional love has conditions, and
Yeah.
sometimes if you see it's unconditional love, you think you can just keep abusing people. But unconditional love actually has conditions, and that's what I saw. That's what I was ready to fight for. What's that love? Hmm.
Such a great take. Okay. So tell me, what is a cause or an organization that's been impactful to you on your journey that you'd like to give a shout out to?
Sure. Thanks for asking that. So I
Yeah.
love to give a shout out to a program called Stride, and they are a part of a bigger organization in Kitchener Waterloo, Ontario, called Community Justice Initiatives. And Stride was a very important part of my healing because they were a group of volunteers that came into the prison. They would bring cards and crafts and snacks and just brought a whole lot of like positivity and feelings of warmth and support. And even when you get out of prison, you can still reach out to these people. So they're definitely really important. Through that group, I was able to make crafts and send them out to my family. And it was, it was just really, really nice to see that people believed in you, even if they were complete strangers.
Yeah. I'm sure that must have really felt good to see a group of people coming in wholeheartedly, giving what they got. It sounds like you weren't feeling judged.
Yes, absolutely. Not at all.
Amazing. Okay, Emily. So how can people connect with you if they would like to? How are you findable?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram. Our company handle is at Comeback Snacks. My personal handle is at Ems O'Brien. I have LinkedIn, which is Emily O'Brien, and our website is www.comebacksnacks.com.
Perfect. Well, we will make sure all of this is on your show notes page if it's not already. That's perfect. So, Emily, guess what?
What?
You have just dared yourself to share. Congrats.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you did it. Emily, I would just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the story that you've shared today, speaking so openly about your time in prison, well, even house arrest before that, the internal dialogue, all the impact, everything that you struggled with, everything about your core experience and your comeback has been full of lessons and inspiration. I am truly grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for listening. And reach out to me anytime you like. And happy to help anyone I can.
Amazing. Once again, Emily, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.